Well, a very warm welcome to the, as Birya Joshi put it earlier, finale of The Burning House, which I quite liked. So yeah, we've had this really lovely, we were just talking about the team meeting, we've had this quite spacious 3 weeks of looking at this, just this one parable. And we're going to finish off this evening. What I will do is I will tell the story again. Many of you will have heard it before, either in this series or you've come across the story before. I'm hoping to tell it slightly differently than I did a couple of weeks ago, but we shall see. And then I'm going to, talk about a different aspect of the story that we haven't covered yet. But I'll go into that in a bit. So, in the famous words, are you sitting comfortably? Get yourselves settled and get ready to hear a story. A long time ago, in a land far away, there lived an old man. And this old man was a very, very wealthy man. He owned a lot of different things. One of the things that he owned was a house. And this wasn't an ordinary house. This was a huge house, like a mansion type house. But it was in quite a state. So it was in a real state, well, more than a state of disrepair, actually. It was in a state of, well, almost ruin, I think. The floorboards were rotting, the roof was leaking, plaster's falling off the walls. It's not somewhere you would think you would want to be. It's got lots of dark corners, it's got ghosts, demons, animals running around all over the place. It's been seriously neglected for a very long time. It might surprise you to learn that this house is full of people. There's a lot of people living in this house, including the children of the owner of the house, the children of the old man. It is said 20, maybe even 30 of his children are living in this house. And one day, vroom, the whole thing goes up in flames. And at that point, the old man, the father of the children, is outside of the house. And he sees the whole house has gone up in flames. And immediately he realizes his children are inside the house. And he's panic-stricken. He's really concerned. His children are in a burning house and they need to get out. And he calls to them and he says, children, get out of the house. Get out of the house now. It's on fire. You are not safe. But the children, maybe they hear him, but they don't really pay him any heed. And at this point, I'm going to invite us all to just imagine ourselves. Close your eyes if that's helpful. Don't if you don't want to. Imagine what it will be like to be one of the children in the house. And the reason that they don't really hear or take any notice of their father is that they're so absorbed in their games. They're so absorbed in what they're doing. So maybe we might imagine that we're in this place. It's probably quite dark. Who knows what's going on in some of the corners where we are. And maybe it's a little bit hot at this point also. Maybe we're sort of feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but we're really absorbed. Maybe we're watching our favourite television programme or a really good film. Maybe we're scrolling through our phone, just looking at this and that, but quite mesmerised by it. Maybe we're fantasising about a partner of our dreams. Maybe we're planning something that's going to make this sort of slightly uncomfortable feeling that we're experiencing It's going to help it make it all better. Maybe we're planning a holiday or planning to move house or something like that. Maybe we're very busy working, doing something very important indeed. So we're absorbed in whatever our chosen game is. Maybe it's a few of them all at once. And we hear the voice, get out, you're in danger. You need to get out of the house now. And maybe we can feel it's a bit hot, but we're not really aware of an imminent danger. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll just finish watching this film. Or, yeah, hang on a minute, yeah, I hear you. I'm just going to finish doing this. Perhaps just feeling into how absorbed we can get. Just carrying on with whatever we're up to. And so us, maybe like the children, we don't heed what the elder says. And so, sort of coming back to the elder outside, he's quite beside himself at this point. His children are not listening. The flames are getting higher and higher. He's quite panicked. And then he has an idea and he thinks, I know what I'll do. And he calls again and he says, children, if you come out right now, you could have a goat cart or a deer cart or an ox cart. And I'm just going to invite you again to imagine yourself back in the house, still absorbed in whatever you were doing. And maybe you don't hear an offer of carts of those varieties. Maybe you hear something like, if you come out now, you will have no more suffering for yourself. If you come out now, you can have complete tranquility and contentment. If you come out now, you could gain the happiness of all beings. Again, perhaps just noticing how that feels and if there's any response to those different calls. And now what happens in the story is the children really want the carts. They're really interested in those carts. And they jump up and they go running out of the house. And maybe if we were really interested in what we just heard, we might jump up and go running out of the house. Perhaps, elbowing each other out of the way. Maybe I've just elbowed Viru Joshi out of the way to get out of the house. And everybody gets outside. We all get outside. And we're out in the open, fresh air, having responded to that call for those different things. And then the elder is out there and he's delighted. Everyone's out. Oh, everyone's safe. Everyone's going to be all right. And he gives everybody an ox cart. An ox cart that is huge, bejeweled, all kinds of fineries, beautiful white oxen, the speed of the wind to pull it. There's people to look after you in it. There's people to look after the cart. And each person gets into a cart and drives off free as the wind. So that is another telling of the parable of the burning house. So, as has previously been mentioned, we're going to focus on the carts this evening, which seem to be hotly anticipated. I had no idea. So let's get into the carts, the goat carts, the deer carts, the ox carts. What is going on with the carts? But actually, what I would like to do is dedicate this offering, what I'm going to say, to Bhante Sangha, my teacher, the founder of this movement. I wanted to sit by my shrine so that there could be a photograph of him here while I was speaking, and he's beaming away actually, which is extremely encouraging. I dedicate that to him, and it will become clear why I particularly want to dedicate it to him. I mean, in a way, I always want to dedicate whatever I say Dharma-wise to Bhante, but yeah, it will become clear. So in the White Lotus Sutra, the Buddha has just told this story to a huge gathering of people, and then he turns to Shariputra, who is one of his disciples, and he explains that the goat carts, the deer carts, and the ox carts, they represent different formulations of the Buddha's teaching. Different forms of Buddhism adapted for different temperaments, characters, the needs of different people. They all ultimately lead in the same direction. They all ultimately will lead to enlightenment. And Bhante is very clear. He just simply puts it, Buddhism is whatever conduces to enlightenment, to the process of the evolution or the development of the individual. So all of these different forms of Buddhism are ultimately heading in the same direction. I'm not going to go into detail about the particular sorts of carts. Suffice to say that the ox cart represents the pinnacle of the teachings, according to the Mahayana, that is. So the Mahayana, which is bringing out, practicing for all beings, the ideal of enlightenment for all beings. We also call that the bodhisattva ideal. And the Buddha asks Shariputra at this point, he says, well, you know, the father in the story, the old man in the story, and I think the Buddha might say, you know, that's me, that's the Buddha. So he says, that is the father, or am I, guilty of falsehood? Because actually I promised 3 different kinds of cart, but I only gave out one kind of cart, the ox cart. And Shariputra is very clear in his response. He says, no, you are not guilty of falsehood. You were using skillful means, expedient means. You needed to get all of the children out of the house. All of those beings were in danger. And you know, you're aware that they've all got different temperaments, they've all got different responses. Some of those children would have responded to the thought of a goat cart, some would have responded to the thought of a deer cart, and some maybe would have responded to the thought of an ox cart. So you needed to kind of cover all the bases in order to save all the beings. But I do think it's really interesting question. Why wouldn't all the children have just responded to an ox cart? Like, why not just offer an ox cart? And if he'd have said just ox carts, or maybe to sort of put it another way, this particular formulation of Buddhism, would the children have come out? Would we have come out? Would I have come out? So I'm just thinking about that, and you know, we need to hear something we can respond to that gets our attention. And I would say at different times in our lives we can be so caught up in our games, in our narrow perspectives, maybe so closed off. Maybe I should just speak for myself. I can be all of those things. That I cannot possibly conceive, I cannot possibly imagine the level of freedom offered by an ox cart, the level of freedom offered by the idea of freedom, liberation, happiness for all beings, that I could play a role in that. This is vast. It's almost an incomprehensible vision, and we might shy away from it. It might be just too big, or we might just be left totally untouched by it. Actually, it's so far out of what we know, what we're familiar with, and I think we can lack the imagination, the ability to imagine something different, to be able to connect with that. And I think you can see this on really mundane levels as well. So it made me think of my 20-something self when I first went along to a Buddhist centre with my friend Claire, and I think she was going along to meditate, and she sort of took me along with her. There would have been meditation, there would have been a teaching, and I don't remember either of those particularly, but I do remember thinking everybody was a bit weird. And I also remember, it's interesting because I think I must have had some pull to it. I must have had some pull to the idea of it. But I remember thinking, if I was going to join, and that was the way I sort of thought of it, I think, I'd have to become really dull, pious, boring. Yeah, I was kind of, at that point, deep in my games of a kind of alcohol-fueled social life that was just inconceivable not to kind of have that. And I'm not saying, and Buddhism doesn't say that drinking alcohol is wrong. I'm not saying that. There's something about drinking alcohol to excess that might cloud your ability to be mindful. But my 20-something self saw this as this sort of, I'd have to just become this really, well, yeah, really boring person. And I was afraid of what I would have to give up. It was just a bit too big. And it was like a stomach sinking. And I can still feel that sort of, you know, your stomach sinks and you think, oh no, I'm going to have to do this. Just thinking about how dull my life would have to become. And it's only now that I know how wrong that view was. I think if you told my 20-something self what my life looked like now, she probably would be quite appalled, actually, if she sort of heard what I was doing. And yet, I am the most fulfilled I've ever been in my life. My life has more meaning than I ever thought possible at this point. And I've got a richness of connection I couldn't have comprehended back then, actually. And I'm not even enlightened yet. So, you know, there's so much more to come. You know, it's extraordinary what I've gained in those intervening years. And yet I just couldn't imagine that at that point. Couldn't answer that call, I guess. And I think that is a process that goes on over and over again in our spiritual life. It certainly has been for me, of sort of like perhaps being confronted with something. It's like, oh, there's a part of me that's like, oh, and then there's another part of me that's like, oh, no, that's too much. I'm going to have to change to do that. That sinking feeling, I've definitely had that on more than one occasion as I've sort of carried on my spiritual life. And it's always just a bit of a lack of imagination about what that might be like, and often quite a wrong view of what that might be like. I kind of assume it's going to be a certain way. And so years later, well, maybe not years later, probably about 7 years later, I went back to a different, I was in a different space. Literally, I was in Bristol this time. And some things had changed, I think. I think the heat in the burning house had cranked up a few notches. I was feeling, you know, more uncomfortable. And I did have this sense in myself that I needed to learn how to meditate. I needed to learn how to meditate. And actually, I'd just like to take a moment to thank my dear friend Claire, who didn't give up on me after that first time. And I won't go into it, but she sort of kept on at me about meditation, and turned out she was right. Yeah, I tried a lot of things. I was still suffering. So I went on my own this time. I went on my own, and I think we have to want to evolve. It has to come from us. So Bhante is very clear. You can't make people evolve against their will. They have to be engaged. They have to be engaged. And for that, you need positive inducements, or you might say carts, in order to help people evolve and connect with that possibility. And we can see from the parable, just saying, get out, you need to get out, this is a good idea, get out, doesn't engage us. It doesn't engage us. It's like the stick approach, you know, the carrot and the stick. The stick is like sort of, get out. You've got, in a way, you've got no idea what you're getting out to. And it's always much more pleasant to stay with the familiar, I think, if you've got no idea what you're having to step into. Or you might have a really wrong idea of what it would mean to step out. You might lack that imagination of knowing what that would be. So dangling a carrot is much more likely to get us to respond. And of course, the carrots in the parable of the burning house are the carts. They're the carts that the children think, ooh, what a bit of that. And so I was thinking, what might our carts look like? And I was thinking, for me, when I went along to Bristol and was able to respond, was able to kind of see a cart or hear about a cart and want it, actually it was the people I met. Some of the people I met were deeply impressive to me. Some of the people I met had a kind of self-possession, a self-confidence. They were kind, they were wise, but they were really engaged with something. Like they were really passionate about something. You could feel that there was a real aliveness to their lives. That for me was incredibly attractive. I just thought, I want whatever they've got. How have they got that? Okay, I'm gonna do what they're doing. I'm going to follow that path and see if I can become even a bit more like that. That was a huge pull for me. And the other thing I think for me at that point was just hearing the truth. And I was able to resonate with it. They had a 6-week rolling program back then in Bristol, different aspects of the Dharma. This was on Newcomers Night every 6 weeks. And I just stayed, and I just go round and round again every 6 weeks, just wanting more and feeling that pull of something that had real meaning, that just made sense. Actually, it's like, well, yes, this just makes sense. And it was pulling me. When I sort of think about it, I think, yeah, I just kept going back. I just kept going back. And it's not even, you know, at this point in time, when I just sort of started going along in Bristol, that I could fully comprehend what I was stepping into. I could have no notion at that point about how much my life would change, actually. But the inducements, the carts, the pull was enough to get me started, enough to get me engaged and interested. And when I was thinking about like what are my carts now, in a way they haven't changed that much. They're both of those things that I've said. And Sangha, so the community of people, all of us here, the wider Cambridge Sangha, the UK, Europe, the whole international Sangha that we have in Triratna is a huge pull for me. It's an extraordinary thing, you know. Bhante has always put a deep emphasis on friendship and spiritual community. And I think because of that, we have this extraordinary community within Triratna, where we're all practicing together. Friendship's a really important part of that. And we're all supporting each other to evolve. And you know, I've been feeling very emotional all day today, and I've realised it's because, you know, Bhante Sangharajta, he put together a cart that I can really easily get into. He put together the teachings and practice of Buddhism that enables me and so many other people to get out of that house, get out of that shocking place, to know that it's possible to get out of that house. If Bhante hadn't have started the Triratna movement, I would still be sitting in the house, huddled over, having no idea that there was an option, there was an alternative, there was a possibility to do something else. So I feel incredibly grateful to him for putting together this marvellous cart. And Bhante says we're all evolving together. We're all participating in the same process of higher evolution, and that this is really the message of the parable of the burning house. We're all evolving together. We're all participating in the same process of higher evolution. And this is really the message of the parable of the burning house. We're all helping each other to respond to the call, to hear the call, to respond to it in different ways. And you know, the higher evolution, this sort of evolving of our hearts and our minds, it's like moving bit by bit from the confined, scary, dark place like the burning house into the fresh air and the freedom and the light of the ox cart of enlightenment, so to speak, and gaining what you've never had before. Gaining what you've never had before. And in order to gain what you've never had before, you have to have an enticement, an inducement, and you have to have a bit of imagination, I think, or a bit of faith to kind of take that leap to see what might be possible, to see what might be out there. Yeah. And so for me personally, and maybe for many of us here, it's thanks to Bhante that we are gaining what we never had before. So I'm going to leave it there. We'll go into groups. I've got a couple of questions that you might want to think about in your groups, or feel free to just, you know, bring up anything that's arising for you. So the first question is, what are your carts? What are your inducements to put down your phone and get out of the house? And also, can you think of a time in your life when you've gained something that you never had before? And what was that experience like? And I think of a sort of, I mean, we might have very sort of different takes on this, but I can think of just the process of giving a Dharma talk, actually. It's quite a basic one, but if you just said to me, well, when I first went along to Bristol, that I would be able to kind of sit and talk about the Dharma, I'd have found that very difficult to imagine on many different levels, on a sort of confidence level, on a all sorts of things really, and yet over time this thing has become possible. And I think we may all be able to think of maybe things that we've experienced in our lives, or changes that have happened to us in our lives that we couldn't really have imagined, but that we've sort of taken a leap into or something. I think often gaining something you've never had before, and I'm not talking about getting a new iPhone, I think that's clear, but just to make that clear, gaining something you've never had before requires an inducement, maybe a cart, something to kind of have a vision of, to kind of sort of aim for, but also maybe a bit of a leap out of your comfort zone. And I think that's required to get out of the burning house as well. Okay, enjoy your groups, and see you on the other side.